My New Year's Eve prank went too far. It ended our relationship forever. This is my first time posting, and I'm using a throwaway account because I really don't want this tied to my main. Honestly, I'm not even sure why I'm here. Maybe I'm looking for support or clarity, or maybe I just want to get it all off my chest. Whatever the case, here I am, spilling my guts to a bunch of strangers on the internet. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sabrina, and for the sake of anonymity, let's call my ex-boyfriend Jack. Jack and I were together for about 5 years, and it was amazing, until it wasn't. Now, the thing about me is that I've always been a bit of a prankster. No, scratch that, I've always been a huge prankster. It's just part of who I am, or at least it used to be. There's something about pulling off a well-planned prank that feels good. Of course, Jack was no exception to this side of me. In fact, he was my favorite target. When we first started dating, my pranks were pretty harmless, cute, even. I'd do things like hide sticky notes with silly messages all over his apartment, or switch his coffee to decaf without telling him, just to see if he noticed. He'd roll his eyes and give me this little smirk that I absolutely lived for. But here's the thing, Jack wasn't, and I guess still isn't, a huge fan of pranks. It's not that he hated them outright, at least not at first, but I could tell they weren't exactly his favorite thing. He's the kind of guy who values order and predictability, while I thrive on chaos. In the beginning, though, he didn't complain. I think he saw it as one of my quirks, something that came with the package of dating me, and since my pranks were relatively harmless back then, he just went along with it. He'd laugh it off or give me a playful lecture about how I was going to give him a heart attack one day. I thought it was all part of the fun. I thought it was our thing. In hindsight, I think he was just tolerating them because he loved me, not because he genuinely enjoyed being the butt of my jokes. But at the time, I didn't notice that nuance. To me, it was just fun and games. And since he wasn't outright complaining, I thought everything was fine. Things started to take a different turn when someone, a friend of mine actually, casually suggested that I try vlogging or starting a couple's account. She said that I would totally blow up on social media with the kind of stuff I did. I remember laughing it off at first, saying that I wasn't the content creating type. And it was true. I wasn't really into the idea of putting myself out there like that. I didn't even post on my personal social media that often, so the thought of creating content seemed overwhelming and frankly out of character for me. But then life threw me a curveball. I got laid off from my job. It wasn't personal or anything. They were doing company-wide cutbacks, and I was part of a large group that got let go. Still, it hit me hard. And even though I was actively searching for a new job, the process was slow and discouraging. I had too much time on my hands and too much anxiety weighing me down. That's when I started spending more and more time on social media. At first, it was just a way to pass the time, but the more I scrolled, the more I found myself sucked into this world of couples, accounts, prank videos, and viral challenges. I'd see these couples pulling pranks on each other and racking up millions of views. It was like a whole new world I hadn't paid much attention to before. I realized that what they were doing was what I usually did to Jack. The only difference was that they were recording it, editing it, and sharing it with the world, and they were getting paid for it. That part especially stuck with me. Some of these accounts had sponsorships, ads, and merchandise lines. They'd turned their pranks and antics into actual careers. At first, the idea seemed far-fetched. I wasn't a content creator, and I didn't have any experience with editing or building an audience. But the more I thought about it, the more tempting it became, especially because I was unemployed at the time. I was already struggling to find a new job, and the thought of going viral and potentially never having to work a regular job again was like a siren song. I started to daydream about it. What if I could make this work? What if our page blew up? I wouldn't have to spend hours tweaking my resume or sitting through awkward interviews. I could be my own boss, doing something I already enjoyed. It seemed like a win-win. It honestly seemed like such a good idea at the time. I mean, what could go wrong, right? I had a knack for pranking. Social media was booming with content like this, and people were making a living off it. It felt like the stars were aligning for me to try something new. One day, while we were sitting on the couch after dinner, I casually brought it up to Jack. I didn't want to overwhelm him or make it seem like I was forcing him into something, so I tried to frame it as a fun idea. He gave me a look, the kind of look that said he wasn't really into the idea, but didn't want to start an argument. He shrugged and told me that he wasn't really into it, but I could do whatever I wanted as long as I kept him out of it. At first, I felt a little deflated. I had hoped he'd be more excited about the idea, maybe even want to join in and make it a team effort. But then I realized he hadn't outright said no. He hadn't told me to stop or discouraged me. In my mind, that was enough to move forward. With that, I decided to dive in head first. I spent the next few days researching everything I needed to know about starting a content channel. I watched endless tutorials on filming, editing, and building an audience. I scoured the internet for affordable equipment, ring lights, a decent camera, a tripod. I even treated myself to a beginner-friendly video editing software. It was a lot of prep work, but I was determined to make it happen. I figured if I was going to do this, I'd do it right. After setting everything up, I started small with a few harmless videos. Nothing too crazy, just little pranks that I thought would make people laugh but wouldn't push Jack too far. For example, one of my first videos was a classic fake spider. In the bathroom prank, I filmed myself carefully placing a rubber spider on the toilet seat, then waited with my phone in hand. As Jack went in, his reaction was priceless. He jumped back, let out a startled, "What the hell?" and then laughed when he realized it wasn't real. It was perfect, short, funny, and harmless. I edited the clip, added some background music, and uploaded it to my new account. I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, it actually got a decent number of views. A few people even commented. That little bit of feedback was all the encouragement I needed. I felt like I was onto something. The next prank was a simple switching sugar for salt in his coffee video. Again, harmless but funny. Jack gave me his usual annoyed but amused reaction, and I made sure to cut the video before he could say anything too grumpy. At first, it was exciting, like genuinely amazing. I loved it. I mean, here I was, creating content, putting myself out there, and getting attention for something I enjoyed doing. It felt good, really good. And honestly, I started to think that maybe this could actually work. Like maybe I could turn this little side thing into something big. I mean, why not? People did it all the time, right? They started small, worked their way up, and then boom, they were influencers. I was convinced I could do it too. So I kept at it. I kept recording pranks, editing videos, and posting them. At first, I was thrilled with the response. I got a few comments here and there, a couple of likes, and what I considered a decent number of views. But then I started wanting more. Because, let's be real, a decent number of views wasn't going to cut it if I wanted to go viral. And that's what I really wanted. I wanted those millions of views, the flood of comments, the subscribers pouring in. I wanted the kind of success that would make me a full-time content creator, the kind where I wouldn't have to stress about finding a new job or paying bills. I wanted to achieve the daydreams I'd started building in my head about this whole thing. And that's when it hit me. If I wanted more attention, I needed to do more. The harmless little pranks I had been doing were cute, sure, but they weren't the kind of thing people were going to talk about or share with their friends. They weren't viral material, so I started slowly upping the pranks. Nothing crazy at first, just little things to get a bigger reaction out of Jack. Like I did one where I pretended to lose his keys. He laughed a bit, but I could tell he was starting to get mildly annoyed. Still, I didn't think much of it because, well, it was all in good fun, right? But even with those slightly bigger pranks, I wasn't seeing the numbers I wanted. The views were still decent, but that was it. Decent wasn't enough anymore. I wanted those big, viral numbers, the kind that would make my videos blow up overnight. That's when I decided to push things a little further. I started planning pranks that were more elaborate and honestly a little riskier. Like, I did one where I pretended the Wi-Fi was out for an entire day, knowing full well how much Jack relies on it for work. He was frustrated, but when I told him it was a prank, he just shook his head and walked away. Another time, I set up a fake accident where I spilled juice all over his favorite shirt. He was annoyed, but again, I thought it was harmless. Looking back, I probably should have noticed the signs. Jack's reactions were becoming less amused and more tired. But at the time, I didn't see it. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. I was so caught up in chasing this idea of success that I ignored the little cracks that were starting to form. Because here's the thing about trying to go viral. It's addicting. Once you start thinking about it, it's hard to stop. You get this tunnel vision where all you can focus on is, how do I make this bigger? How do I make this better? How do I get more people to watch? And that's exactly where I was. I did a couple more elaborate and honestly much riskier pranks. One that really stands out and makes me cringe the most in hindsight was when I called Jack during an important business meeting to tell him the house had burned down. I even went as far as sending him a fake photo of a burnt-out house that I found online. He panicked and canceled his meeting on the spot, rushing home to make sure I was okay and to see the supposed damage. Of course, when he got home and saw everything was fine, he was furious, and rightfully so. I mean, who does that? But at the time, I brushed it off. I apologized and told him it was just a joke. In my mind, it was harmless because no real damage had been done, right? He just looked at me, shook his head, and muttered something about how I needed to stop. I didn't listen, though. Even with all those elaborate pranks, the views were still just decent. They weren't bad, but they also weren't anywhere near the viral sensation I was hoping for. My videos were getting a few thousand views here and there, but nothing that would make me an internet star or turn me into a full-time content creator. And that's when I knew I had to push things further. Yes, I know now that it was stupid, so stupid, but at the time, I kept telling myself, just one big hit, one viral video, and this will all be worth it. Then New Year's Eve rolled around. I first got the idea from TikTok. I was scrolling through my feed and came across this couple who had done a prank. It wasn't exactly like what I ended up doing, but it sparked something in my head. In their video, they had set up this elaborate scheme to make one of them think they'd won the lottery, only to reveal it was fake. The reactions were over the top, and the video had gone insanely viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. It was everything I wanted for myself. And that's when inspiration struck. I thought, if they can do it, why can't I? I didn't want to copy their prank exactly. I wanted to do something even bigger, something that would get people talking and sharing like crazy. After all, it was New Year's Eve. What better time to pull off a grand prank and start the year with a bang? I spent hours planning it, thinking about how I could make it work. I wanted it to be shocking, unforgettable, and most importantly, something that would make people laugh. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Deep down, though, I think I just wanted the attention. I wanted the likes, the shares, the comments. I wanted to go viral, no matter what it took. I decided I was going to plan a cheating prank. Yeah, I know, the dumbest idea ever, but at the time I thought it was genius. My goal was to make it as believable as possible, something so shocking and over the top that it would have everyone talking. I roped in a friend of mine to help. Let's call him Jake. Jake was super skeptical from the start. He kept saying, "Are you sure about this? This seems like it could go really wrong." Honestly, that should have been my red flag. If Jake, who is usually the chill, go-with-the-flow type, was uncomfortable with it, I should have stopped right there. But no, I didn't listen. I kept pushing him, saying it was all in good fun and that it would make for an amazing video. Eventually, after a lot of convincing, he reluctantly agreed. The plan was simple, or so I thought. Jack was coming back from a 3-day business trip that evening. I knew roughly what time he'd get home, assuming his flight wasn't delayed, so we planned everything around that. Jake came over that evening, and we set everything up. I made sure the camera was hidden and positioned to capture the perfect angle. Then we staged the scene. We got into bed, stripped down, not completely, just enough to sell the illusion, and got under the sheets. The idea was to make it look like Jack was walking in on us in the middle of, well, you know. We waited until I heard his car pull into the driveway. I was so focused on how this was going to look on camera, how people were going to react when they saw the video, that I didn't stop to think about what Jack's actual reaction might be. The second he walked through the door, Jake and I started making noises. Loud, exaggerated, ridiculous noises. I thought it was hilarious. Jack didn't. He came upstairs, clearly hearing the sounds, and burst into the bedroom. The look on his face when he saw us under the sheets. It wasn't confusion or even anger at first. It was pain, genuine, heart-wrenching pain. But that pain quickly turned into fury. Jack tore the sheets off us, and before I could even say a word, he was screaming. I burst out laughing because, to me, it was a joke, a prank. I kept saying, "It's a prank, babe. It's just a prank." But he wasn't laughing, not even close. Jake, meanwhile, looked like he wanted to disappear. He kept mumbling, "It's a prank, man. It's not real." But Jack wasn't listening. Jack turned his attention back to me and told me to get out. He said he was done and couldn't take any more. He said he wanted me out of his house, now. I froze. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. It was supposed to be funny. We were supposed to laugh about it afterward, maybe even get into a fake argument for the camera before I revealed the prank. This wasn't part of the plan. I tried to calm him down, to explain that It was all fake, but he wasn't having any of it. He said he didn't care, that it wasn't funny, that I was toxic, and he wanted me gone. Jake, clearly uncomfortable and feeling like a third wheel in what had become a very real fight, mumbled an awkward apology and left. I didn't even stop him. I was too shocked to do anything but stand there, staring at Jack as he paced back and forth. We argued for what felt like hours. It wasn't even a back and forth kind of argument. He was firm and kept repeating the same thing over and over. I needed to leave. He didn't want me there. The more he said it, the more it sank in that he was serious, that this wasn't just an outburst he'd calm down from eventually. I gave up. I packed a bag while crying like crazy, my hands shaking as I shoved clothes and random items into it. I couldn't believe it was happening. Jack called an Uber for me, which somehow made it even worse. It felt cold, like he couldn't even bear to drive me himself. I cried the entire ride to my parents' house. The driver didn't say anything, just glanced at me in the rearview mirror a couple of times with that awkward sympathy people give you when they don't know what to say. When I got to my parents' house, I was a mess, my face red and blotchy, tears still falling as I dragged my bag up the driveway. They were immediately alarmed, seeing their daughter show up unannounced, crying, and carrying a bag was obviously a huge shock. They brought me inside, sat me down, and tried to calm me down enough to explain what was going on. Once I could finally speak, I told them everything about the prank, about how Jack had kicked me out, about how everything had gone horribly wrong. The reaction was not what I wanted. They were angry, not at Jack, but at me. Disappointed would be putting it lightly. They asked me what I had expected to happen. Did I really think that kind of prank would end well? Did I think humiliating someone I loved, someone I'd been with for years, was going to be funny? They didn't hold back, and honestly, they were right. The disappointment didn't stop there. Word of what happened spread fast, too fast. Some of my friends found out either from Jack or through the grapevine, and they didn't hesitate to let me know how they felt about it. Text after text came in, all saying the same thing. I was wrong. I'd crossed a line. Even Jake, who had been part of the prank, messaged me. He told me how uncomfortable the whole thing had been for him and said he didn't think I should post it at all. That was the breaking point for me. Like, excuse me? After everything I'd gone through, after my relationship imploded, after I humiliated myself, you're telling me not to post it? What was the point then? Why had I put myself through all this if I wasn't even going to get the content out of it? I suggested blurring his face, trying to find some middle ground, but deep down, I knew I couldn't post it. Too many people knew. Jack had already told me to delete every single video of him from my page. He didn't just want the prank video gone, he wanted everything. I cried and begged him to reconsider. I tried every angle, apologies, interventions, mutual friends, but he was done. He wouldn't budge. He made it clear that our relationship was over. A few days later, he had me come by to pack the rest of my stuff from his house. That was it. 5 years together, and it ended just like that. He didn't even leave room for a conversation. He cut me off completely, like flipping a switch. Blocked me on everything, no explanations, no closure. If that wasn't bad enough, my social media account got banned shortly after. The account I had poured all my time, effort, and energy into, gone, just like that. I suspect someone reported it, maybe one of my ex-friends, or even Jack. I don't know for sure, but the way it happened was so sudden and unexpected. One day I was scrolling through my posts, trying to figure out what to do next, and the next, I couldn't log in. I was devastated. Everything crumbled so fast I could barely keep up. One moment I was planning a prank I thought would take my content to the next level, and the next, my relationship, my reputation, and my social media presence were all gone. It's honestly hard to process how quickly it all fell apart. I feel so stupid, all because I couldn't stop chasing views and validation from strangers on the internet. All because I didn't know when to stop, when to listen to the people around me who were telling me it was a bad idea. It was greed, plain and simple. 5 years together, and it all ended in the blink of an eye. It still doesn't feel real. It happened so fast, so violently. It gives me whiplash every time I think about it. 1 minute, I was planning pranks and thinking about content. The next, I'm single and alone. And now I have to start from scratch. I need a job. My days as a content creator are officially over. That chapter is closed, slammed shut. And honestly, I don't even know if I want to open it again. What's the point? It ruined my life. I'm back at square one, scrolling endlessly through job boards, trying to find something, anything, that will pay enough to let me survive. Living with my parents isn't exactly a long-term solution either. I love them, but they've made it pretty clear they're not going to let me freeload indefinitely. I can already feel the clock ticking before they start making those little comments about contributing to the household, or worse, charging me rent. I can't even blame them. I'm an adult. I should be able to stand on my own 2 feet, but right now, I can barely stand at all. And then there's the friends, or should I say, the lack of friends. It's like losing Jack meant losing half my social circle too. A lot of our friends I thought were our friends, sided with him. They didn't even try to hide their disappointment in me. It's not like I don't get it. I crossed a line. I screwed up. But it hurts more than I can put into words. I feel like an outcast in my own life. I can't even hang out with the few friends who haven't completely cut me off because they're all still connected to him. It would be awkward. Hell, they probably think I'm the villain in this whole situation. And maybe they're right. So I'm stuck at home most days, with nothing to do but scroll the internet, looking for jobs, or just sit in bed staring at the ceiling. Some days, I can't even muster the energy to get up. I feel useless, broken, and so incredibly stupid for letting my life spiral out of control like this. 5 years. 5 years. It wasn't just a relationship. It was a life we were building together. We were already talking about marriage, about kids, about the future we wanted. It felt so solid, so real. And now, it's gone. Completely gone. All that time, all those plans, all that love, wiped out. Because I couldn't see past my own need for attention.